The sound of a metal locker slamming shut echoed through the hallway of Oak Ridge High School outside Chicago. Most students barely noticed. For 17-year-old Marcus Carter, however, that ordinary sound would soon become the dividing line between the life he knew and the nightmare that followed. The morning had begun with reassuring normality. A cold Illinois wind rattled the bare branches outside the school windows while Marcus sat in advanced placement government, reviewing notes for an upcoming scholarship interview. His dreams stretched far beyond the suburban streets surrounding him. He wanted to attend law school someday. He wanted to make a difference. Most importantly, he wanted to make his parents proud. Marcus lived in one of the most respected households in the city. His mother, Dr. Evelyn Carter, served as chief of trauma surgery at a major Chicago hospital. His father, Judge Nathaniel Carter, presided over federal cases involving organized crime, corruption, and civil rights violations. Despite their demanding careers, they had raised Marcus with discipline, humility, and a deep respect for the law. That morning, however, none of those accomplishments seemed to matter. The classroom door suddenly opened. Vice Principal Harold Bennett stepped inside, accompanied by two uniformed police officers. Conversations died instantly. Students exchanged nervous glances. Something felt wrong. "Marcus Carter?" Bennett asked. Marcus looked up. "Yes, sir." The older officer stepped forward immediately. "Stand up and bring your backpack." The command carried no explanation. Marcus frowned. "Did something happen?" "You'll find out soon enough," the officer replied. A wave of uneasiness spread through the room. Marcus slowly gathered his belongings while dozens of eyes followed his every movement. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" he asked. The officer's expression hardened. "Don't make this difficult." Marcus felt his heartbeat accelerate. He had never been in trouble, never suspended, never arrested. The entire situation felt unreal. As he stepped into the hallway, the second officer seized his arm. "Hey, that hurts," Marcus protested. "Then cooperate." The grip tightened. Students emerging from nearby classrooms stopped and stared. Phones appeared almost instantly. Videos began recording. Marcus felt humiliation washing over him. "What did I do?" he demanded. The older officer finally answered. "A luxury watch was stolen from the athletic locker room. It was found in your locker." Marcus froze. "That's impossible." "Tell it downtown." Within seconds, cold handcuffs locked around his wrists. Gasps erupted from nearby students. Someone whispered his name. Someone else laughed. Marcus felt his world collapsing. The officers marched him through the crowded hallway like a convicted criminal. Hundreds of students watched. Some looked shocked. Others looked entertained. At the center of the crowd stood Tyler Langford. Marcus recognized him immediately. Tyler was wealthy, popular, and furious after losing a prestigious academic leadership position to Marcus 2 weeks earlier. For a brief moment their eyes met. Tyler smiled. The expression lasted less than a second, but it was enough. Something cold settled in Marcus's stomach. Outside, gray clouds rolled across the Chicago sky. Wind swept through the parking lot as the officers pushed him toward a waiting patrol car. Marcus looked back at the school. Everything familiar suddenly felt distant. His classes, his teammates, his future. As the rear door slammed shut, he realized a terrifying possibility. This might not be a misunderstanding. Someone might have wanted this to happen. And whoever had set the trap knew exactly where to place the evidence. The ride to the precinct felt longer than it actually was. Marcus Carter sat alone in the back of the patrol car while rain began tapping against the windows. Every traffic light seemed to last forever. Every passing minute deepened the fear growing inside his chest. He replayed the morning repeatedly. The stolen watch, the accusation, Tyler Langford's smile. None of it made sense. Marcus had never touched Tyler's belongings. He barely spoke to him outside school competitions and student government meetings. Yet something about Tyler's expression lingered in his mind. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't satisfaction. It looked like victory. At the 4th District Precinct, officers processed Marcus with mechanical efficiency. His backpack was confiscated. His shoelaces were removed. His fingerprints were taken. The humiliation felt endless. Officer Richard Kane, the arresting officer, completed paperwork behind a desk while occasionally glancing toward Marcus. "You should make this easier on yourself," Kane said. Marcus stared at him. "I didn't steal anything." "Everyone says that at first." "Because sometimes it's true," Kane smirked. "Not according to the evidence." Marcus remained silent. Years earlier, his father had taught him a lesson during a family dinner discussion about wrongful convictions. When emotions rise, facts become your lifeline. Never surrender facts for comfort. Never confess to something you didn't do. Marcus remembered every word. After nearly an hour, he was escorted into a small interrogation room. The walls were painted dull grey. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The room felt designed to drain hope. Officer Kane entered carrying a file folder. "Let's try again," he said. He placed several photographs on the table. One showed Tyler's locker. Another showed the supposedly stolen watch. The final image showed Marcus's locker with the watch inside. "Looks bad, doesn't it?" Kane asked. Marcus examined the photographs carefully. Something immediately stood out. "That's not my lock." Kane frowned. "What?" Marcus pointed. "The padlock in this picture isn't mine. Mine has blue tape wrapped around the bottom. My track coach told us to mark them because several students had identical locks." For a brief second, Kane hesitated. Then his confidence returned. "Nice try. Check the security footage." "We already have enough evidence." Marcus leaned back. That answer disturbed him more than anything. The officer wasn't interested in finding the truth. He seemed interested only in confirming a conclusion already reached. Hours earlier, across downtown Chicago, Judge Nathaniel Carter was concluding a federal hearing involving a corruption investigation tied to several influential developers and public officials. The case had attracted significant media attention. Powerful people stood to lose fortunes. Nathaniel had spent months navigating threats, pressure campaigns, and political attacks. None of them had affected him, until his private phone rang. Only 3 people had that number: his wife, his son, and his chief clerk. The moment he heard Evelyn's voice, everything changed. "Nathaniel," she said. Her voice sounded controlled. Too controlled. The way trauma surgeons sounded before delivering devastating news. "Marcus has been arrested." Silence filled the judge's chambers. Nathaniel slowly stood. "Explain." Within 30 seconds, Evelyn relayed everything: the accusation, the handcuffs, the physical force, the humiliation. Each detail tightened something inside him, not anger, something colder, something more dangerous. Purpose. Across the room, his law clerks noticed the change immediately. Judge Carter rarely displayed emotion. Now his jaw was rigid, his eyes were hard, the room itself seemed smaller. "I'm leaving," he said. "Sir, the afternoon hearing begins in 20 minutes, one clerk reminded him. Nathaniel grabbed his coat. "Reschedule it." "The press is already assembled." The judge paused at the doorway. "Then tell them justice will be delayed today." His voice dropped lower. "Because my son needs it first." Meanwhile, back at the precinct, Marcus sat alone after another failed interrogation attempt. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. Then he heard hurried footsteps outside. Several voices followed. One sounded nervous, another sounded frightened. Then a third voice spoke. Deep, calm, authoritative. Marcus immediately recognized it, his father's voice. And judging by the panic suddenly spreading through the hallway, someone at the precinct had finally realized exactly whose son they had arrested. The atmosphere inside the 4th District precinct changed before Marcus ever saw his father. Conversation stopped abruptly. Officers who had been laughing moments earlier suddenly lowered their voices. Desk sergeants straightened their posture. Detectives emerged from offices wearing expressions of growing concern. Something important had arrived. Marcus sat inside the interrogation room listening carefully. The heavy steel door remained closed, but the tension beyond it was impossible to miss. Then came the unmistakable sound of his mother's voice, firm, controlled, protective. "I want to see my son immediately." A few seconds later, another voice answered, "Ma'am, you'll have to wait until—" "No." The interruption was sharp. Marcus smiled despite everything. That was definitely his mother. Outside in the lobby, Dr. Evelyn Carter stood facing a nervous lieutenant. Years spent leading trauma teams had taught her how to remain calm during catastrophe. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't threatening anyone. That made her far more intimidating. "My son is a minor," she said. "He was physically injured during this arrest. I want medical access immediately." Lieutenant Martin Ross adjusted his collar. "We're following procedure." "Then your procedure needs revision." The automatic doors opened. Every head turned. Judge Nathaniel Carter entered the building. Unlike television judges, Nathaniel rarely relied on dramatic displays. His reputation came from preparation, precision, and absolute command of facts. Yet the moment he stepped inside, the room fell silent. At 6'4", dressed in a dark, tailored suit, he carried himself with quiet authority. People moved aside without being asked. Even the officers recognized him. Several had appeared in his courtroom. None remembered those experiences fondly. Nathaniel walked directly to Evelyn. "How long?" he asked. "Almost 3 hours." His jaw tightened. "Who authorized questioning without counsel?" "Officer Kane." Nathaniel nodded once. A dangerous sign. He approached the front desk. "I'm Judge Nathaniel Carter. My son, Marcus Carter, is being detained in this building. Take me to him." The desk sergeant swallowed. "Sir, Lieutenant Ross is handling—" "Then Lieutenant Ross can accompany us." Ross immediately stepped forward. "Of course, Judge Carter. Right this way." No one argued. No one delayed. The balance of power had shifted instantly. As they walked through the secured hallway, Ross attempted explanations. "We're investigating a reported theft involving valuable property." Nathaniel continued walking. "What evidence connects my son to the theft?" Ross hesitated. "The watch was recovered from his locker. Was the chain of custody documented?" "I believe so." "You believe?" Ross immediately regretted his answer. By the time they reached interrogation room 3, sweat had formed along his forehead. Officer Kane emerged from a nearby office, carrying paperwork. The confidence he had displayed earlier vanished instantly when he recognized the approaching judge. "Sir," Kane began. Nathaniel looked directly at him. The stare alone silenced the officer. "Open the door." "Judge Carter, we were still conducting—" "Open the door." The command carried no anger, only certainty. Kane unlocked the room. The door swung inward. Marcus looked up. For the first time that day, fear loosened its grip. His parents stood there. His mother rushed forward immediately. Her medical instincts activated before her emotions. She examined his face, checked his wrists, measured his pupils, documented everything with her phone. Only after confirming he was stable did she finally hug him. Marcus felt the weight of the day crash into him. "I'm okay," he whispered. Evelyn shook her head. "You shouldn't have had to be." Meanwhile, Nathaniel remained near the doorway. His eyes studied every detail. The handcuffs, the photographs, the interrogation notes, the untouched legal forms. Nothing escaped him. Finally, he turned toward Officer Kane. "Did you read him his rights?" Kane hesitated. "We intended to once formal questioning began." "You were already questioning him." Silence. "Did you permit legal representation?" More silence. "Did you contact his parents before interrogation?" The silence grew heavier. Nathaniel nodded slowly. The gesture frightened Kane more than shouting would have. "Interesting, Ting," the judge said. Then he noticed something lying among the evidence photographs. A picture of Marcus's locker. Nathaniel picked it up. His eyes narrowed. He examined the image carefully. Very carefully. Then he looked toward Marcus. "Son, where is the championship medal Coach Reynolds gave your team last spring?" Marcus blinked. "Inside my locker door. Why?" Nathaniel held up the photograph. The medal wasn't there. Neither was the sticker Marcus had placed beside it 2 years earlier. The picture supposedly showed Marcus's locker. But suddenly something seemed very wrong. Nathaniel lowered the photograph and looked directly at Lieutenant Ross. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "I think someone just submitted fabricated evidence into a criminal investigation." The room became completely silent. Lieutenant Ross stared at the photograph in Judge Nathaniel Carter's hand. Officer Kane looked confused. Marcus sat upright. Even Evelyn stopped taking notes. Nathaniel placed the photograph on the interrogation table. "This image was submitted as evidence," he said. "Correct?" Ross nodded. "Yes. And this is supposedly Marcus's locker." "That's what the report states." Nathaniel pointed toward the photograph. Then explain why several identifying items are missing. Nobody answered. Marcus leaned forward. My state track sticker should be there. He pointed at the inside panel. And Coach Reynolds gave every varsity captain a team medal last year. Mine hangs from a hook inside the door. Nathaniel nodded. Exactly. Ross examined the picture. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on his face. The photograph showed a locker, but perhaps not Marcus's locker. Where did this image come from? Nathaniel asked. Ross looked toward Kane. Kane immediately shifted uncomfortably. School security staff provided it. Which staff member? I'm not sure. Nathaniel folded his arms. You submitted evidence into a felony investigation without verifying its source. Kane remained silent. The answer was obvious. An uncomfortable feeling spread through the room. If the photograph was unreliable, what else had been overlooked? Nathaniel turned toward Ross. I want access to every piece of evidence collected today. Judge Carter, there are procedures. Good, then let's follow them. The lieutenant reluctantly agreed. Within minutes, officers began bringing files, photographs, and reports into a conference room. The investigation that had seemed completely settled only hours earlier suddenly looked fragile. Meanwhile, across town, in an affluent suburban neighborhood, Tyler Langford sat in his bedroom staring at his phone. Videos of Marcus's arrest were spreading rapidly online. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. Many praised the police, others questioned the arrest. Tyler should have felt satisfied. Instead, anxiety tightened in his stomach. Things were moving too fast. The plan had been simple: humiliate Marcus, damage his reputation, maybe cost him a scholarship. Nothing more. Nobody was supposed to investigate this deeply. Nobody was supposed to involve federal judges. His phone suddenly vibrated. A text message appeared. Unknown number. The message contained only 6 words. Stay quiet. Delete everything, immediately. Tyler froze. A second message arrived. Do not mention the locker room. His face went pale. Very few people knew about the locker room. Even fewer knew what had happened there. Back at the precinct, Nathaniel continued reviewing evidence. Years on the federal bench had taught him something important. Most major mistakes were hidden inside small details. And small details were beginning to pile up. The timeline didn't work. The witness statement contained contradictions. The photographs appeared questionable. Then he reached the property inventory sheet. His eyes narrowed. Lieutenant. Ross looked up. Yes, sir. Nathaniel slid the document across the table. Who recovered the watch from Marcus's locker? Officer Kane. And who witnessed the recovery? Ross scanned the form. His expression changed. There was no witness signature, no secondary verification, no documentation confirming the watch had actually been found where the report claimed. The room grew noticeably colder. That's impossible, Ross muttered. Apparently not. Nathaniel tapped the paper. Evidence recovered without a witness. Evidence photographed without verification. A minor interrogated without counsel. A questionable chain of custody. Each sentence landed like a hammer. Ross removed his glasses. For the first time all day, he looked genuinely worried. Not about Marcus, about the department. At that exact moment, another officer rushed into the conference room. Lieutenant, we pulled the school security footage. Ross stood immediately. Show me. Everyone gathered around the monitor. The video displayed the athletic hallway shortly before lunch. Students moved through the corridor. Teachers passed by. Then Tyler Langford appeared. Marcus watched carefully. Tyler approached the row of lockers. He looked around. Then he did something unexpected. He crouched beside Marcus's locker for nearly 20 seconds. Nobody spoke. The footage continued. Tyler stood, walked away, and moments later reported his watch missing. Officer Kane's face lost all color. Lieutenant Ross slowly turned toward him. Tell me, Ross said quietly, did you ever watch this video before arresting Marcus Carter? The silence that followed answered the question, and for the first time, Nathaniel realized this case might be far bigger than a high school prank. Because Tyler Langford hadn't been acting alone. Someone had warned him. Someone was already trying to cover their tracks. A storm rolled across Chicago that evening. Dark clouds swallowed the skyline, while flashes of lightning illuminated the city in brief bursts of white. Inside the 4th District precinct, however, The real storm was unfolding around a single security video. Lieutenant Martin Ross replayed the footage repeatedly. Each viewing produced the same uncomfortable conclusion. Tyler Langford had approached Marcus Carter's locker before reporting his watch stolen. That fact alone should have changed everything. Instead, nobody had reviewed the footage before making an arrest. Ross looked toward Officer Kane. "Tell me exactly why this video wasn't examined before you brought Marcus in." Kane swallowed. "The school administration said they had a witness." "That's not what I asked." The lieutenant's voice carried a sharp edge. Kane shifted nervously. The evidence seemed straightforward. Nathaniel Carter leaned back in his chair. "Straightforward cases require investigation too, officer." No one argued, because everyone now understood the truth. The arrest had happened because people assumed guilt before confirming facts. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, Tyler Langford sat alone in his bedroom. His hands trembled as he stared at his phone. 3 missed calls, 2 unread messages, one growing sense of panic. His father, Garrett Langford, had not yet returned home. That was unusual. Garrett controlled a massive real estate development company operating throughout Illinois and Indiana. He rarely missed dinner. Tonight was different. The federal investigation Judge Carter had been overseeing for months suddenly felt much closer than Tyler realized. His bedroom door opened. Garrett entered. His expensive suit looked rumpled. His face looked pale. Tyler immediately recognized something he had never seen before: fear. "Dad," Garrett closed the door. "Did anyone contact you today?" Tyler hesitated. "What do you mean?" "Answer the question." The harsh tone startled him. "A few people texted." Garrett stepped closer. "Anyone connected to Marcus Carter?" Tyler shook his head. "No." The lie sounded weak. Garrett noticed. "Tyler," his voice lowered. "This is important." For several seconds neither spoke. Then Tyler made a mistake. The police already arrested him. Garrett froze. A dangerous silence filled the room. "How did you know that?" Tyler's stomach dropped. The videos had not yet reached local news. Only students and police knew details. Garrett stared at his son. The realization spreading across his face was unmistakable. Something wasn't right. Back at the precinct, another breakthrough arrived. A forensic technician entered the conference room carrying a sealed evidence envelope. "Lieutenant, we finished processing the watch." Ross stood. "Results?" The technician opened the file. "No fingerprints belonging to Marcus Carter." The room fell silent. "None?" Ross asked. "None." Nathaniel exchanged a glance with Evelyn. The case against Marcus was collapsing piece by piece. The technician continued. "However, we found partial prints belonging to another individual." Ross leaned forward. "Who?" The prints matched Tyler Langford. Nobody seemed surprised. Not anymore. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Yet Nathaniel remained focused, because something still bothered him. The anonymous text messages, the rush to arrest Marcus, the missing verification procedures. These weren't random mistakes. Too many people had benefited from Marcus being discredited. Then his phone vibrated. A secure message from one of his federal investigators appeared. Nathaniel opened it. His eyes narrowed instantly. Attached was a document connected to an ongoing corruption case. One name appeared repeatedly: Garrett Langford. Another name appeared beside it: Officer Richard Kane. Nathaniel slowly looked up from the screen. The room suddenly felt much smaller. "Lieutenant Ross," he said quietly, "how well does Officer Kane know Garrett Langford?" Ross frowned. "I don't know." "Why?" Nathaniel turned the phone around. Ross examined the document. His expression changed immediately. Campaign donations, private event photographs, fundraisers, multiple documented connections between Kane and Langford. The lieutenant's face drained of color. For the first time, he understood the scale of the problem. This was no longer a false arrest. It was potentially a conspiracy. And somewhere beyond the walls of the precinct, people were already scrambling to protect themselves before the truth reached daylight. Rain hammered against the precinct windows as the investigation entered a dangerous new phase. What had begun as a simple theft accusation was unraveling into something much larger. Lieutenant Martin Ross sat motionless, staring at the documents spread across the conference table. The connections were undeniable. Garrett Langford and Officer Richard Kane had attended the same political fundraisers. Their names appeared together at charity events. Several photographs showed them socializing outside professional settings. None of those facts proved corruption. But combined with everything else, they painted an unsettling picture. Nathaniel Carter studied the lieutenant carefully. "You didn't know about these connections?" Ross shook his head. "No." Would Kane have been required to disclose them? The lieutenant hesitated. If they created a conflict of interest, yes. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implication. If Kane had personal ties to the Langford family, he never should have led the investigation. Across town, Garrett Langford sat alone inside his corporate office, overlooking downtown Chicago. The city lights reflected against floor-to-ceiling windows. Normally the view relaxed him. Tonight it felt suffocating. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Lawyers, business partners, political contacts. Everyone wanted answers. The federal corruption investigation had already placed him under scrutiny. Now his son's actions threatened to bring even more attention. Garrett poured himself a drink. His hands were shaking, not because of Marcus Carter, because of Judge Nathaniel Carter. Garrett knew exactly who he was dealing with. Nathaniel had built a reputation for relentless persistence. Once he started asking questions, he rarely stopped. And Garrett had too many secrets buried beneath too many years. Back at the precinct, Marcus finally received official confirmation. All charges were being dropped. The announcement should have felt like victory. Instead, he felt exhausted. The damage had already spread. Videos of his arrest had accumulated hundreds of thousands of views. Students were talking, teachers were talking. Scholarship committees would eventually see the footage. Even if his name was cleared, people would remember the handcuffs. Marcus stared through the conference room window. What if nobody believes me? The question hung in the air. Evelyn squeezed his shoulder. The truth matters. Marcus looked down. Not always. Nathaniel heard the pain beneath the words. It broke something inside him. Because his son wasn't wrong. Sometimes lies traveled faster than facts. Sometimes reputations never fully recovered. That reality fueled his determination. The truth wouldn't simply emerge on its own. Someone would have to fight for it. Then an officer entered, carrying a sealed evidence box. Lieutenant, Internal Affairs requested all materials connected to the arrest. Ross nodded. Good. As the officer turned away, a folded piece of paper slipped from the evidence file and landed on the floor. Nobody noticed except Marcus. He picked it up. At first glance it appeared insignificant, just a printed visitor log from Oak Ridge High School. Then he saw a familiar name. Officer Richard Kane. Marcus frowned. "Dad?" Nathaniel looked over. "What is it?" Marcus handed him the paper. The judge scanned the document. His expression hardened instantly. According to the log, Kane had visited Oak Ridge High 3 days before the alleged theft. Not once, twice. There was no official police investigation at that time. No reported crime, no emergency, no reason for him to be there. Ross read the document over Nathaniel's shoulder. That can't be right. Nathaniel disagreed. I think it is exactly right. The judge stared at the dates. A disturbing possibility formed in his mind. What if Marcus hadn't been randomly selected? What if the plan had begun days earlier? What if someone intentionally targeted him? The room suddenly felt colder. Nathaniel slowly folded the paper. Then he looked directly at Lieutenant Ross. I want security footage from every one of Kane's visits to that school. Ross nodded. I'll request it immediately. Nathaniel stood. Do that, because if Officer Kane was preparing this before the watch ever appeared, then this isn't misconduct anymore. He paused. The words that followed chilled everyone in the room. It's premeditated. And somewhere in Chicago, a man who thought he had buried the truth was about to discover that the ground beneath him was beginning to crack. The following morning arrived beneath a blanket of heavy fog drifting in from Lake Michigan. Chicago looked different when hidden behind mist. Buildings became shadows, landmarks disappeared, truth itself seemed harder to find. Yet inside the offices of Internal Affairs, hidden truths were finally beginning to emerge. Judge Nathaniel Carter sat across from Lieutenant Martin Ross, reviewing newly recovered school security footage. Hours earlier, Technicians had located recordings from Officer Richard Kane's unexplained visits to Oak Ridge High School. Nobody expected what they were about to see. The first video displayed Kane entering the school 3 days before Marcus's arrest. A school administrator greeted him. The footage lacked audio. Still, their body language told a story. Kane wasn't investigating a crime. He wasn't interviewing witnesses. Instead, he spent nearly 40 minutes touring athletic facilities, locker rooms, hallways, equipment storage areas. Ross frowned. Why would a patrol officer need this? Nathaniel didn't answer. His attention remained fixed on the screen. The second video proved even more troubling. During Kane's second visit, another person appeared, Tyler Langford. The room fell silent. Everyone leaned closer. The footage showed Tyler meeting Kane near the athletic offices. They spoke briefly. Then Kane handed Tyler something, a small object, too small to identify clearly. Ross immediately paused the video. "Can we enhance that?" A technician nodded. Several minutes later, the image sharpened. Not perfectly, but enough. Nathaniel stared at the screen. Then his expression darkened. The object appeared to be a locker key. Across the city, Garrett Langford was having a very bad morning. Federal investigators had arrived at one of his development offices before sunrise. Several computers were seized. Financial records were copied. Employees were interviewed. Rumors spread quickly. Investors became nervous. Business partners stopped returning calls. The empire Garrett had spent 20 years building suddenly looked vulnerable. He sat in his office watching the news. Then his personal attorney entered. The man's face revealed everything. "What happened?" Garrett asked. The attorney closed the door. Tyler talked. Garrett felt the blood drain from his face. "How much?" "Enough." The room seemed to tilt. Garrett lowered himself into a chair. For several seconds he couldn't speak. The attorney continued. "Internal Affairs interviewed him this morning. And he admitted planting the watch." Garrett closed his eyes. The disaster he had feared was no longer approaching. It had arrived. Back at the precinct, Lieutenant Ross received the official interview transcript. Tyler's confession was detailed, painfully detailed. He admitted purchasing the counterfeit watch online. He admitted placing it inside Marcus's locker. He admitted filing the false report. Most importantly, he admitted receiving assistance. Officer Richard Kane had shown him how to access the locker. Nobody spoke for nearly 10 seconds. The words settled heavily over the room. Nathaniel finally broke the silence. "Why?" Ross looked down at the report. Tyler had answered that question too. Jealousy, resentment, humiliation. Marcus had defeated him academically, defeated him athletically, earned scholarships Tyler wanted. Won respect Tyler believed belonged to him. The confession painted a portrait of entitlement turning poisonous. But something still didn't fit. Nathaniel sensed it immediately. Tyler had motive. Kane had opportunity. Yet the scale of the operation felt larger than teenage jealousy. Then Ross received another call. He listened quietly. His expression changed, slowly, dramatically. When the call ended, he looked directly at Nathaniel. "Judge Carter, what is it?" Ross swallowed. Financial Crimes just found multiple payments from a Langford consulting company to an account controlled by Officer Kane. The room went silent again. Not gifts, not campaign donations. Payments. Large payments. Nathaniel felt a chill run through him. Because bribery changed everything. This wasn't merely a frame-up anymore. This was organized corruption. Then Ross delivered the final piece. The first payment was made 4 days before Kane visited the school. Nathaniel slowly stood. The puzzle pieces finally aligned. Marcus hadn't been chosen by accident. He hadn't been framed because of a teenager's jealousy alone. He had been selected because someone wanted Judge Nathaniel Carter distracted, pulled away from a federal corruption investigation. And suddenly the question was no longer who framed Marcus. The question was how many powerful people were involved. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Marcus Carter had never been the true target. He was collateral damage, a means to an end, a weapon aimed directly at Judge Nathaniel Carter. The conference room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Outside, the city continued moving through another ordinary day. Traffic filled the streets. People hurried to work, children attended school. Yet hidden beneath that normal routine, a carefully constructed scheme was beginning to collapse. Nathaniel stood beside the window overlooking the precinct parking lot. For months, he had presided over a federal investigation involving bribery, fraudulent development contracts, and political corruption. Several influential businessmen faced potential indictments. One of those businessmen was Garrett Langford. The connection now seemed impossible to ignore. Lieutenant Ross reviewed the financial records again. "The payment started 4 months ago," he said. "How much?" Evelyn asked. "Nearly $200,000. Marcus stared in disbelief. Officer Kane hadn't merely exercised poor judgment, he had been bought. Ross continued reading. The money moved through consulting companies and shell accounts. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Classic laundering methods, the kind often used to disguise bribery. The kind federal prosecutors understood very well. Then another investigator entered, carrying additional documents. "We found something else." Everyone looked up. The investigator placed a file on the table. Inside were phone records, hundreds of calls, dozens of messages. Communication between Garrett Langford and Officer Kane stretched back nearly a year. The room grew quiet. This wasn't a recent relationship, it was an ongoing partnership. Nathaniel flipped through the pages. Then he stopped. One entry immediately caught his attention, a phone call placed the night before Marcus's arrest. Duration, 18 minutes. Another call occurred less than an hour before Tyler reported the watch stolen. Duration, 12 minutes. The timing wasn't coincidence. Not anymore. Across Chicago, Garrett Langford sat inside a private conference room surrounded by attorneys. The atmosphere felt like a funeral. Nobody discussed business. Nobody discussed investments. Everyone focused on survival. One attorney finally spoke. "If federal prosecutors connect the bribery payments to the false arrest, exposure becomes significant." Garrett rubbed his temples. "Define significant." The attorney didn't hesitate. "Prison." The word landed heavily. Garrett looked away. For years, he had believed wealth could solve almost anything. Political problems, legal problems, business problems. Now he faced something money couldn't easily fix. Evidence. Meanwhile, Marcus returned home for the first time since the arrest. The familiar house should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt different. The world felt different. He stood inside his bedroom, looking at trophies, photographs, and college acceptance letters. 24 hours earlier, they represented his future. Now they felt fragile, easily destroyed. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. Nathaniel entered. Father and son sat quietly for several moments. Neither rushed to speak. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "Were they really trying to get to you?" Nathaniel considered the question. "I think they were trying to distract me." "Why?" "Because people sometimes fear consequences more than they value honesty." Marcus looked down. "I almost signed that confession." The admission hung in the room. Nathaniel nodded. "I know. I was scared." "That's exactly why they wanted you there." Nathaniel leaned forward. "Fear makes good people doubt themselves." Marcus stared at the floor. "I kept thinking maybe nobody would believe me." His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "The truth doesn't become weaker because someone lies louder." For the first time since the arrest, Marcus felt something beginning to return. Confidence, hope, trust. Downstairs, however, another phone call arrived. Nathaniel answered. His expression changed immediately. The caller was a federal investigator. The news was significant, very significant. A search warrant executed that afternoon had uncovered encrypted files inside Garrett Langford's company servers. Those files contained private communications, names, payments, plans, and one message sent weeks before Marcus's arrest. Nathaniel listened carefully, then his face hardened, because the message contained a sentence nobody expected. "If Carter won't back off the investigation, pressure his family." Nathaniel slowly lowered the phone. The attack against Marcus had never been about jealousy. Tyler Langford had merely been the tool. The real conspiracy had been directed from much higher up. And now federal agents were preparing arrests. 3 days later, Chicago awoke to headlines that dominated every major news outlet. Federal agents had executed multiple warrants across the city before sunrise. Offices were searched, records were seized, Several executives were taken into custody. Television helicopters circled above downtown buildings while reporters scrambled for details. The story spread nationwide within hours. At the center of it all stood one name, Garrett Langford. Federal prosecutors announced charges involving bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and fraud. The investigation Judge Nathaniel Carter had spent months overseeing was finally reaching its climax. Yet inside the Carter household, the focus remained elsewhere. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, reviewing school assignments he had missed. His bruises had begun fading. The deeper wounds remained. Every time his phone vibrated, anxiety returned. Every time he opened social media, he saw reminders of the arrest. Some comments supported him. Others questioned his innocence. The internet had already reached its verdict long before facts emerged. That reality hurt more than he expected. Across town, Garrett Langford sat inside a federal detention facility, awaiting his initial appearance. The confidence that once defined him had vanished. His company's stock was collapsing. Business partners were cooperating with investigators. Former allies were distancing themselves publicly. Years of influence were evaporating in real time. Then came another blow. His attorney entered carrying new paperwork. Officer Kane signed a cooperation agreement. Garrett closed his eyes. He understood immediately. Kane was talking, and when frightened people started talking, secrets rarely stayed buried. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs completed its investigation. The findings were devastating. Officer Richard Kane had violated department policy repeatedly. Evidence procedures had been ignored. Reports had been altered. Witness statements had been manipulated. Most damaging of all, Kane admitted receiving financial compensation connected to the false arrest. The conspiracy was no longer theory. It was documented fact. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel received an unexpected visitor. Principal Margaret Ellis from Oak Ridge High School arrived at the Carter residence. She looked exhausted, ashamed, determined. Marcus joined his parents in the living room. For several moments, nobody spoke. Finally, Ellis broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." Marcus looked at her quietly. "I failed you." The words carried genuine regret. Our school trusted assumptions instead of evidence. Her voice trembled slightly, and because of that, a student who did everything right suffered publicly. Marcus appreciated the honesty. It didn't erase what happened, but it mattered. Ellis continued, "The school board unanimously voted to clear your record and issue a public statement." She handed him an envelope. Inside was an official letter. His name had been fully cleared. All disciplinary references were removed. The district would also implement new policies regarding student investigations. Something good was finally emerging from the damage. That evening, another surprise arrived. A representative from a national scholarship foundation requested a video conference. Marcus expected questions. Instead, he received encouragement. The foundation had reviewed the facts. They admired how he handled the ordeal. His scholarship remained intact. Additional opportunities were now being considered. After the call ended, Marcus stepped outside onto the back porch. The sun was setting beyond the trees. Golden light spread across the neighborhood. For the first time in days, he felt able to breathe fully. Nathaniel joined him. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable, peaceful. Then Marcus asked a question. "Is it over?" Nathaniel looked toward the horizon. "The legal case isn't." "What about us?" The judge smiled faintly. "We're still standing." Marcus nodded. That answer meant more than any courtroom victory. Yet neither father nor son knew that one final chapter remained, because the next morning, federal prosecutors would reveal the full conspiracy. And hidden inside those revelations was a shocking name nobody expected to see. The following morning, reporters gathered outside the federal courthouse before sunrise. Television crews lined the sidewalks. Satellite trucks crowded nearby streets. Nobody wanted to miss what federal prosecutors were calling a major announcement. Rumors had circulated all night, additional arrests, new evidence, a wider conspiracy. The truth proved even more shocking. Inside a packed courtroom, prosecutors unveiled the full scope of the corruption network. For years, influential developers, consultants, and public officials had manipulated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Bribes flowed through shell companies. Favors were exchanged quietly. Investigations were delayed. Witnesses were pressured. Opponents were targeted. Then the final name appeared: former Deputy Mayor Anthony Mercer. The courtroom erupted with whispers. Mercer had built a reputation as a reform advocate, a trusted public figure, a rising political star. Behind closed doors, however, prosecutors alleged he coordinated efforts to protect corrupt business interests, including Garrett Langford, including Officer Richard Kane, including the campaign that targeted Marcus Carter. Federal investigators revealed encrypted messages connecting Mercer to discussions about neutralizing threats to ongoing business operations. One threat had been Judge Nathaniel Carter, not because he was political, not because he was ambitious, because he refused to compromise. The courtroom remained silent as the evidence was presented. For Marcus, watching from the gallery beside his mother, the realization felt surreal. His humiliation, his arrest, his fear. None of it had been random. Powerful adults had treated his life like a strategic inconvenience, a tool, a distraction, a means to protect money and influence. Yet their plan had failed, because truth proved more resilient than they expected. Weeks later, the city continued processing the fallout. Garrett Langford accepted a plea agreement. Officer Kane lost his badge permanently and faced criminal charges. Several officials resigned. Additional investigations expanded across multiple agencies. The scandal remained front-page news. For the Carter family, however, healing mattered more than headlines. Spring arrived gradually, snow disappeared, trees regained their leaves, life moved forward. Marcus returned to school. The first day felt awkward. Students stared, teachers watched carefully, but something had changed. People now knew the truth, not the rumors, not the edited videos, the truth. Many students approached him quietly. Some apologized, others thanked him. Several admitted they had never understood how easily innocent people could be harmed. Marcus accepted their words graciously. Bitterness would only create another prison. Graduation arrived beneath clear blue skies. Families filled the football stadium. Proud parents cheered from crowded bleachers. As Marcus crossed the stage to receive his diploma, applause echoed throughout the field. Nathaniel and Evelyn stood together. Neither tried to hide their emotions. The journey had cost all of them. Fear, anger, sleepless nights. Yet it had also revealed something powerful: character, resilience, courage. Later that evening, the family gathered on their backyard patio. Warm summer air drifted through the neighborhood. Laughter replaced anxiety. Hope replaced fear. Marcus looked at his parents. "You know," he said, smiling, "I think I finally understand what you always meant." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "About what?" Marcus looked toward the fading sunset. "The law matters, but the people willing to defend it matter even more." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Nathaniel smiled. A genuine smile, the kind that appeared rarely. "That's exactly right." The story of Marcus Carter became more than a scandal. It became a reminder. Justice is not automatic. Truth is not guaranteed. Fairness requires vigilance, and sometimes the strongest act of courage is refusing to surrender the truth when powerful people demand silence. Marcus never forgot that lesson. Neither did the city. And years later, when he began studying law himself, he carried that lesson into every classroom, every courtroom, and every challenge that followed. Because one terrible day had nearly stolen his future, instead it helped define it. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.